Welcome to your deep dive, all about the Canadian Child Benefit. We're going to be trying to decode a whole stack of CRA publications so you can skip the jargon and get straight to the good stuff, like how the CCB can impact your family's budget.
That's right. We're going to break down the essentials, connect the dots, and uncover some surprising facts that might just change your perspective on this benefit.
Okay, let's unpack this. First things first. What makes the CCB different from, other types of government assistance?
We'll think of it as, a financial boost designed specifically for families raising children under 18. The key difference, it's non-taxable. That means it's yours to keep, unlike other income sources that might be taxed.
So this non-taxable aspect, how does that actually play out in a family's finances? Is it really that impactful?
It can be, especially when you consider things like budgeting and long-term financial planning. Imagine having a consistent monthly payment that you can rely on, knowing that the government won't be taking a cut. It offers a level of financial stability that can be invaluable for families.
That's a really interesting perspective. It's not just about the money itself, but the peace of mind that comes with knowing it's truly yours.
Exactly. And there's another layer to this. Applying for the CCB also automatically registers your children for other benefits, like the GST-HST credit. That's money back on the goods and services tax you pay. And the Canada Carbon Rebate, which is a payment aimed at offsetting the cost of the federal carbon tax. It's like a domino effect of potential financial benefits.
So it's almost like a gateway to a whole network of support programs.
You could say that. It's a smart move to apply. Even if you're not sure if you'll qualify for the CCB itself, you might be surprised by the other benefits you're eligible for.
All right. So we've established that the CCB can be a game changer for families. But who exactly qualifies for this benefit?
The basic requirements are pretty straightforward. The child has to be under 18 and living with you in Canada. You also need to be primarily responsible for their care and upbringing.
Okay, makes sense. But life isn't always straightforward. What about those more complex family structures, like shared custody situations? How does the CCB work then?
You're right, those nuances are important. In shared custody scenarios where the child splits their time fairly evenly between two homes, let's say 40% to 60%, both individuals might be considered primarily responsible.
So in those cases,
Yeah.
would both parents receive the full benefit?
Not exactly. The benefit is split proportionally. Each parent receives 50% of what they would have gotten if the child lived with them full time. It's about ensuring fairness and reflecting the reality of the child's living arrangement.
That's really interesting. It's a much more nuanced system than I initially realized. Now, I know Canada has different residency categories, like permanent residence and temporary residence. Does that affect CCB eligibility?
It definitely does. To be eligible for the CCB,
Yeah.
you or your spouse or common law partner have to be a Canadian citizen, a permanent resident, a protected person, or a temporary resident with specific conditions.
What kind of conditions are we talking about?
Well, temporary residents need to have lived in Canada for the past 18 months and have a valid permit for the 19th month. That's the key. It's not just about being physically present in Canada. It's about having a certain level of established residency.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about demonstrating a commitment to living in Canada, which aligns with the purpose of the benefit, supporting families raising children here. Now, this is a question I bet a lot of people have. What happens if you're earning a good income? Are you automatically out of the running for the CCB?
That's a common misconception. While the CCB amount you receive is based on your income, applying is still worthwhile, even if you think you might be over the limit. Here's why. The CRA recalculates your benefit every July based on your previous year's income. So let's say your income is high this year, but you anticipate it being lower next year due to a change in job or life circumstances. Applying now ensures you don't miss out if you become eligible later.
So it never hurts to apply.
Exactly. You might be leaving money on the table if you assume you're ineligible.
All right, let's bust some myths. Can you get the CCB for a child in foster care?
Generally, no. Foster children are typically covered by a different system called Children's Special Allowances. These are paid for children under 18 in the care of a government department, agency, institution, or Indigenous governing body.
So there's a separate system in place to ensure those children receive financial support. What about kinship care arrangements? Those are a bit different, right?
This is where things get interesting. If you're caring for a child under a kinship or close relationship program, which can be similar to foster care in some ways, you might still be eligible for the CCB.
Wait, really? Even though it's not a traditional parent-child relationship?
Yes, as long as you meet the other CCB eligibility criteria and the child isn't receiving those children's special allowances we talked about. you could receive the benefit. It's about recognizing that families come in all shapes and sizes, and the need for financial support can exist in various caregiving situations.
That's a great example of how the CCB goes beyond the traditional nuclear family model. It's a much more inclusive program than I initially thought. And now I'm curious about the application process itself. How easy is it to actually apply for the CCB?
Well, there are a few different ways to apply, depending on your preference and situation. For new parents, there's the automated benefits application, which is linked to your child's birth registration. It's designed to streamline the process. All you need to do is provide consent on the birth registration form to share your information with the CRA.
So no need to submit a separate application. That's incredibly convenient for new parents who are already juggling so much.
Exactly. It's all about making things easier during that hectic newborn phase. But if you're not using the automated benefits application, you have other options. You can apply online through My Account on the CRA website, or you can go old school and mail in a completed form, RC66, which is the Canada Child Benefits application form.
So there's flexibility in the application process. Digital or paper, whatever works best for you. Are there any specific documents that are absolutely essential to have ready when applying?
Yes. A few key documents are crucial. You'll need proof of your and your spouse or common law partner's citizenship or immigration status in Canada. Think birth certificates, permanent resident cards, or temporary resident permits. You'll also need proof of residency in Canada, such as a lease agreement, utility bills, or bank statements, and of course your child's birth certificate.
Those seem like pretty standard requirements for government programs. Anything else that people might not think of?
One more important document is proof that you are the primary person responsible for the child's care. This can be a letter from the daycare or school, a court order, a doctor's note, or even a statement from someone in your community who can attest to your role in the child's life. The CRA provides a full list of acceptable documents on their website. We'll be sure to link that in the show notes for you.
That's helpful. It sounds like they're quite flexible in terms of what they'll accept as proof. Now, what about late applications? What if you miss the window to apply?
Technically, your application is considered late if it includes a period that started more than 11 months ago. If that's the case, you'll need to provide those same documents, but for the entire period you're requesting benefits for. So if you're applying 2 years late, for example, you'll need proof of residency and proof of primary care for those entire 2 years.
It sounds like it can get a bit more complicated the longer you wait. So the key takeaway is to apply as soon as you're eligible.
Absolutely. Being proactive can definitely save you some hassle down the line. Now let's move on to the part that often causes confusion. The calculation of the benefit. How much can families realistically expect to receive? And what factors influence that amount?
This is where it gets interesting, right? Because it's not just a flat rate for everyone.
You got it. The CCB amount is based on several factors. The number of eligible children you have, their ages, your adjusted family net income, and whether any of your children are eligible for the disability tax credit.
Okay, let's break that down. Adjusted family net income. That sounds a bit technical. What does it actually mean?
Think of it as your family's net income, but with a few adjustments made by the CRA. It's calculated using your net income and, if applicable, your spouse or common law partner's net income. Importantly, it doesn't include your child's income.
So it's a reflection of the family's overall financial situation. How does that income factor into the CCB calculation?
Well, there's a base amount you receive per child. This amount starts to decrease gradually once your adjusted family net income exceeds a certain threshold.
Is there a way to understand those base amounts and those thresholds without having to crunch a bunch of numbers?
Absolutely. The CRA has an online calculator on their website that you can use to get a personalized estimate. You can find it by searching Child and Family Benefits Calculator on canada.ca.
That sounds like a really valuable tool. I love anything that takes the guesswork out of these calculations.
It definitely simplifies things. Now let's talk about an aspect of the CCB that's often overlooked. The Child Disability Benefit.
What's the purpose of this benefit?
The Child Disability Benefit, or CDB, provides additional financial support for families caring for children eligible for the disability tax credit. This tax credit is for children with severe and prolonged impairments in physical or mental functions.
So it's about recognizing the extra costs associated with raising a child with a disability.
Precisely. The CDB helps families with those added expenses. The maximum amount you can receive for the CDB is $3,322 per year per child. That's on top of the regular CCB payment.
Does the CDB amount get reduced based on income, like the regular CCB?
It does. But at a higher income threshold, it starts to decrease once the adjusted family net income exceeds $79,087. Again, the specific reduction depends on your family size.
So if you have a child with a disability, applying for the disability tax credit is crucial. Not only does it provide tax benefits, but it unlocks this extra financial support through the CDB.
Exactly. It's a two-for-one benefit that can make a big difference for families.
Now, on a more practical level, are there any situations where families absolutely need to contact the CRA regarding their CCB?
Absolutely. Life is full of changes, and many of those changes can impact your CCB payments. It's essential to keep the CRA updated on anything that might affect your eligibility or the amount you receive.
Can you give us some examples of those life-changing events?
Well, any changes in the number of children in your care is a big one. If you have a new baby, adopt a child, or if a child no longer lives with you, you need to inform the CRA. Same goes for changes to your marital status. Getting married,
Yeah.
separating, or entering a common law relationship will affect your CCB calculation because it changes your adjusted family net income.
Those are significant life events for sure. What about something as simple as moving? Does that require notifying the CRA?
You bet. Even if you're using direct deposit for your payments, updating your address with the CRA is crucial. Otherwise, your payments could be delayed or interrupted. It's a quick and easy step. That can prevent a lot of potential headaches down the line.
It sounds like clear and consistent communication with the CRA is key to a smooth CCB experience. Now, I know the CCB is a federal program, but there seems to be a whole other layer of provincial and territorial programs that tie into it.
You're right. In fact, the CRA administers many of these provincial and territorial child benefit programs, so you don't have to apply separately to each province or territory.
That sounds incredibly efficient. It must be a huge relief for families to have that streamlined process.
Exactly. It's all about simplifying things and ensuring families can access all the benefits they're entitled to. Now, each province and territory has its own specific program with its own set of eligibility criteria and benefit amounts. We won't go into detail on all of them today, but we'll provide links in the show notes.
That's a great resource for our listeners. But to pique their curiosity, could you tell us about a couple of these provincial programs that stand out as particularly unique or generous?
All right, let's start with Alberta. They offer a benefit that's paid quarterly and has two components, a base component and a working component.
A working component? What's that all about?
The amount you receive is partly based on your employment income. Families with higher earned income might receive a larger benefit. It's an interesting approach that recognizes the added costs of raising children while working.
That's very different from the federal approach, which primarily focuses on income level. What other program stands out?
Let's hop over to the East Coast and look at Newfoundland and Labrador. Their child benefit program is designed to be quite comprehensive. In addition to a basic monthly benefit, they also offer a supplement, specifically for families with children under 1 year old.
A supplement for babies. What's the reasoning behind that?
It's meant to help with the costs of early childhood nutrition, which can be significant during that first year of life. It's a targeted approach that aims to ensure infants are getting the best possible start.
I love that. It's so important to support families during those crucial early years. It sounds like these provincial and territorial programs add a whole other dimension to the child benefit landscape in Canada.
They definitely do. And they highlight the importance of not just focusing on the federal level, but also exploring what's available in your specific province or territory. You might be surprised by the additional support you qualify for.
It's all about maximizing those resources and ensuring families are getting all the help they're entitled to.
Exactly. Now, before we move on, we can't forget about Quebec. As always, they do things a bit differently.
Quebec always marches to the beat of its own drum, right?
That's one way to put it. Their family allowance program is entirely separate from the federal CCB and the other provincial and territorial programs we've discussed.
So they have their own unique system.
Precisely. If you live in Quebec, you need to apply for the family allowance directly through Retraite Quebec, which is their provincial agency responsible for pensions and other social benefits. They have their own set of eligibility criteria and benefit amounts, which are independent of the federal system.
So it's essential for Quebec residents to go straight to Retraite Quebec for information about their family allowance, rather than relying on the CRA.
Exactly. The CRA won't have information about the Quebec Family Allowance Program. Retraite Quebec has its own website and resources, where you can find everything you need. We'll include a link in the show notes.
That's really helpful to clarify. It's a reminder that while we're focusing on a national program, there are always regional nuances to consider.
Absolutely. It's important to be aware of those variations to make sure you're accessing all the support available to you. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question.
Oh, I love a good brain teaser. Lay it on us.
We've seen that these programs can vary quite a bit across Canada. Each province and territory has its own unique approach.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, if you could design a child benefit program from scratch, what would it look like?
Ooh, that's a fantastic question. It's like putting on our policymaker hats and reimagining the entire system. What factors would we prioritize? How would we structure the benefits? Would we aim for a universal approach where everyone receives the same amount? Or would we focus on providing more targeted support to those who need it most?
Exactly. There are so many angles to consider. Would we take into account things like the cost of living differences across the country? How would we address the varying needs of families with different income levels? Or the unique challenges faced by single parents?
It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but it's an important conversation to have.
Absolutely. It forces us to think critically about how we as a society choose to support families and children and what values we want to embed in our social programs.
So, listeners, we challenge you to put on your policymaker hats and imagine your ideal child benefit program. What would it look like? Share your thoughts with us on social media. We might even explore some of your ideas in a future deep dive.
That's a great way to engage our audience
Yeah.
and keep the conversation going.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the Canadian child benefit.
We've covered a lot of ground, from eligibility and application procedures to the intriguing variations in provincial and territorial programs.
We even put on our policymaker hats and imagined what our ideal child benefit system might look like.
Now, before we wrap up, let's distill some key takeaways and practical tips for navigating this complex landscape.
Sounds like a plan. What are some of the most crucial points listeners should remember as they embark on their CCB journey?
First and foremost, remember that the CCB is designed to be a true financial boost for families. It's non-taxable, meaning it won't be counted as income when you file your taxes.
So it's like a bonus that goes directly into your pocket, no strings attached.
Precisely. And applying for the CCB unlocks other potential benefits too, like the GST-HS2 credit and the Canada Carbon Rebate. Think of it as a ripple effect of financial support.
Even if you're unsure about your CCB eligibility, it's worth applying just to see what other benefits you might qualify for. It's like a one-stop shop for various support programs.
Exactly. Another crucial point is to stay on top of those life changes. That can impact your CCB payments.
We talked about things like changes in the number of children in your care, shifts in marital status, or even something as simple as moving.
These seemingly small changes can have a big impact on your eligibility or the amount you receive. Keeping the CRA informed ensures that you're receiving the correct benefit amount.
And luckily, there are easy ways to update your information, right?
Absolutely. You can do it online through My Account on the CRA website, give them a call, or even send a letter. They offer multiple options to suit your preferences.
Now, one of the biggest takeaways for me from this deep dive has been the importance of not overlooking those provincial and territorial programs.
Couldn't agree more. They often fly under the radar, but they can provide significant additional support, tailored to the specific needs of each region.
It's like a hidden layer of benefits that many families might not even realize exists.
Exactly. Each province and territory has its own unique program, so it's worth digging into those specifics to see what you might qualify for.
We've highlighted some of the key variations across Canada and included links in the show notes for those who want to explore further.
And of course, we can't forget about Quebec and their independent approach.
Always a special case, right?
Indeed. They have their own distinct family allowance program, completely separate from the federal CCB.
So Quebec residents, make sure you're heading to Retreat, Quebec for information and applications, not the CRA.
That's right. They have their own system and their own set of rules.
Now, as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder.
I'm all ears.
We've spent this deep dive navigating the existing child benefit system in Canada, but I think it's also important to take a step back and reflect on the system itself.
I like where you're going with this.
We've seen that there's a lot of variation across the country, with each province and territory taking its own approach. It makes me wonder what aspects of these programs are working particularly well, and where is there room for improvement?
That's a great question. Should we strive for more consistency across the provinces and territories? Or is there value in allowing for that regional flexibility?
And how do we balance the need for targeted support for low-income families with the principle of universality, where everyone receives a benefit regardless of income?
These are big questions with complex implications. And how do we ensure that these programs remain sustainable for the long haul.
It's an ongoing conversation, and one that requires thoughtful consideration from policymakers, researchers, and everyday citizens alike.
The Canadian Child Benefit and related programs represent a significant investment in families and children. It's essential that we continually evaluate and refine these systems to ensure they're serving those they're designed to help.
So listeners, as you navigate the world of child benefits, don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and advocate for the changes you believe are necessary.
Your voices and perspectives matter in shaping the future of these programs.
We hope this deep dive has empowered you with the knowledge and resources to make informed decisions for your family.
Remember, this is just the beginning. Continue exploring, stay engaged, and join the ongoing conversation about how we can best support families and children in Canada.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.